Formal education will make you a living. Self-education will make you a fortune. Jim Rohan. Hello and welcome to the Durham Talents channel. My name is Jesse Durham. For today's installation of our quote series, we're going to evaluate a quote from the wonderful Mr. Jim Rohan when he said, "Formal education will make you a living and self-education will make you a fortune." Now, I'm a big fan of Jim Rohan, his audios, his books. I have books here, actually one right here, his 7 strategies for wealth and happiness. We've actually done some other quotes on him before, I'm certain of it, in our library. Since we've done over 100 quotes right now, that's still saying something for him to be in there more than once, I think. But I have found this, so I use this particular saying. Why? Because he mentions the word fortune. And if you listen to him, if you read behind him, I mean, again, he wrote his own book on the 7 strategies for wealth and happiness. So I think it's very applicable for a good money conversation here because he mentions the word fortune and he's written about it and spoken about it. But I do love all the other things that I've gleaned from Mr. Rohan, his audios, his books, just in personal growth and development, in thinking. It's been really good for me. So I say that to say, if you've not listened or read anything behind Jim Rohan, I encourage you to go beyond this particular podcast episode to get to his works and check those out for yourself. I highly encourage it. Now, from my background, I couldn't help but think about, I probably heard his saying several years ago now, but I was in my 30s. I would have been in my 30s when I came across this quote, when I came across Jim Rohan. And I'm just going to say that, we all have to combat that human problem, for one thing, that Nash addresses in his Becoming Your Own Banker book, which is the arrival syndrome. Well, many of us come into being introduced to this Becoming Your Own Banker concept with experience, prejudices, pros and cons, baggage. We've been exposed to what Nash would call the noise out there in the financial world. So I'm trying to say that we've had this particular conventional exposure, this conventional education, so many of us. And I know that, some that are listening, you went to private school, charter school, public school, homeschool, etc., all these different things, which is its own interesting talk. I'm a product of a government schooling system. I was even a teacher in a government school. And yet now my wife and I have decidedly chosen to educate from home, which is really cool and interesting. But I thought about what Jim Rohan was saying when he said formal education making you a living. There's no question that you can learn how to pursue a career. You can become an employee somewhere just with a formal education, make a living for yourself. Now, of course, folks that are listening to this kind of information, this kind of a podcast, I believe you're looking for more out of life. So for those that are looking for fortunes in the important areas of life, in family, in finances, etc., we need to address that arrival syndrome that I was talking about. We've got to ditch that mentality of, well, I have my high school diploma, or I have my bachelor's degree, or I have my master's, or I have my doctorate, or I have these initials after my name, or I have this title. You've not arrived. I've not arrived. I was just having a conversation last night with a family friend, and they asked me if I'd read a particular book. Actually, that book also is right here. It's How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And I had, and I told them so. I told them it had been some years. I could revisit it for sure. And I shared a quote there that I remembered from the book. And we had a good conversation. And I just loved hearing what that individual was doing because she's a professional in her space. Her family's doing very well for themselves. They've got lots of irons in the fire. It's just great to hear about good people doing big things, having success, but also being open to learning more, being open to self-educating. And not everybody's going to take listen, I've got those people in my life. You have those people in your life. They're not going to crack a book. They're not going to listen to a podcast. They'll talk about the scores of such and such game. And listen, don't jump on me, sports people, or anybody else. But what I'm saying is it's a human problem. That's all I'm saying. Nash said it. I'm repeating it. We all have to address the arrival syndrome if we want to have continued success. And I just enjoy having conversations with folks that are actively self-educating themselves in a particular area that's of interest to them. And of course, I like sharing what I'm learning and what I'm gleaning from things that I'm learning from. But even more, let me go back to, my careers and experiences. I thought also not just into what it was like for me to pursue, because with Spanish, for example, I pursued a passion. I never knew that I would end up being a Spanish teacher at one point. I just had a burning desire to learn that language. I loved the idea that I could speak words that, I had to work to understand. It was magical to me. Okay. I think it's an incredible thing for someone to learn another language. And there are lots of things that could be paralleled to learning another language, coding on computers. I would be lost. I would be clueless. That is another language to me, and I don't speak it. But I was pursuing a passion that, even though there was a lot that took place in the formal setting of I showed up to this number 1 class, number 2 class, number 3, number 4, etc. I even majored in it. But I would say that the majority of the work that I did to acquire my proficiency in that language was having private conversations with friends, asking them, what does this mean? What does that mean? Or how do you, or traveling abroad. Me traveling abroad to other countries and inundating myself, immersing myself in that atmosphere completely. I feel like a lot more was gained from my self-study than even that formal. And I have a great appreciation for that formal. It was a great and wonderful thing to have a knowledgeable instructor to help me with my grammar and whatnot. So I'm just saying, there's a lot of value. There's a lot of value in having formal instruction on particulars. No question about it. And yet our self-study, I agree with Mr. Rohan, can be that much more profitable for us, that much more advantageous for us. In law enforcement, I would say that I saw the same thing. You could have someone who graduated from high school go straight through a basic law enforcement training course, become certified, and be at the same position, same rank as someone. And this was my experience. I'm not saying this is just where I came from. I had a 4-year degree. I was bilingual in another language. I even had some prior part-time experience when I acquired my first full-time law enforcement position in North Carolina. And I was at the same rank, same income as somebody that had just walked. But I had taken a lot of initiative, and I still believe that I'm the better for it. I still worked on myself and am better for it as an individual. But I'll also point out that was not reflected in my compensation at that particular location. And again, could I have pursued other careers in other locations? Sure. So pros and cons all over. There's no doubt about it. And even when I was in law enforcement, again, you could go the route of meeting minimums, like minimum required hours in class or instruction. But you could also apply for other schools and other camps and things that you could go to. And I did take a lot of that initiative and went to all the camps and schools and instruction that I could get to in my time in that field. And again, was that reflected in my living wage being converted into a fortune? No. I, again, still am very thankful for the skills and the training and the experience that I have now because of that endeavor, but it was not reflected there. And I should say something real quick about another particular area. I didn't have a license. I didn't have a degree. I didn't have any background or experience. But I remember one time, a few years ago now, I had a good friend just prompt me with a question. Well, Jesse, have you ever considered doing anything in real estate? And I said that I had, actually. I'd probably, like many folks, had read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, was very intrigued with real estate, and I just didn't know where I would make an entry. And he shared some experience with me. We were having lunch, having some quality Mexican food, and he shared some thoughts and ideas and a bit of his experience with me. I mean, we were there for an hour. And with what I learned in that hour, I was intrigued to do my own self-study to find out more about that entry point and how I could do something in real estate. Just for example, and again, I'm not making advice here. I'm just sharing a story. I'm sharing something that I did. And I went out, in those next couple of months, I was able to close a couple of different deals successfully, beneficial all the way around, great learning experience. It was trying, it was challenging. Some things were out of my comfort zone, and yet they were doable. And again, it didn't require all these formalities. It was just private individuals contracting with one another, which is something I'm very familiar with in talking about the infinite banking concept, because that's what we're doing here. Is we as individuals, we're going out and we're buying these properly structured whole life policies with mutual companies that pay dividends. They're wanting to provide these policies for folks, and we're wanting to pay premiums into these policies because we're using these policies as our private banking entities, and we're just privately contracting with one another. And that's what I did in real estate, just privately contracted with other folks, found mutually beneficial opportunities, and it was great. And what an interesting thing. And I didn't get that from any kind of formalized education system. So again, my biggest encouragement to everyone here is that you can become your own banker. That's a novel idea for everybody that's not actually already a client and doing that. So you can become your own banker. You can fight the arrival syndrome. You can continue learning. I'm going to encourage you to keep learning. And let's remember Jim Rohan's advice when he said that, could we make a living? Sure. But with self-education, we could make a fortune. So this has been a great pleasure for me. If you found this content helpful or valuable, please like and share this with someone that you care about, that you'd like to see win with money. And if you'd like to have a conversation about how to implement the infinite banking concept in your household or your business or your investing, whatever it is that you're already doing. This has been a great pleasure for me. I look forward to that conversation. Have a great day. Take care.